I'm so excited that I finally got up here because I think at the Caribbean cruise, I started doubting myself. But now I'm really glad because at the cruise...
Well, you could offer better words rather than that I finally got up here, because you're sort of amplifying more resistant time or more times of not being ready. We're nitpicking here, but you get what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Most of you could just say half your sentence and you'd be better off. I'm so glad.
So at the cruise, you said that you were going to spend a complete segment on triaging the momentum. Something like outside of the processes that you already gave us, something to intervene and triage the bad momentum.
Well, what we were really talking about here, you see, interesting that we just said to you all what we just said before you came up here, that Esther's tuned into source energy as much as anyone we've ever known, and under most conditions she can get there pretty quick. It sort of depends on what she's been doing. She prepares herself to see you. She makes sure that she's been daydreaming and meditating and making her list of positive aspects and so forth, you see. And so what we've been talking about here today, about tapping into your true power and about understanding the difference between that power of non-resisted thought and trying to clean up resisted thought. Well, trying to clean up resisted thought is a little bit like just stop the bleeding. If you are really upset about something, even though we want to help you and we'd like to take you all the way to your full empowerment, the likelihood of that happening in that moment is not that great, because you've already got enough momentum going that your world is sort of collapsing around you. And so in most cases, the best anybody can do is stop the bleeding. Does that make sense to you? Well, you all are past that. We wouldn't have the conversation that we had here today with just any group of people that stumble in off the street. They would not be ready to hear this. Most people are not ready to accept their worthiness. Most people would think it was outrageous that somebody would spend as much time as we are spending with you not focused on your problems. But we know for sure that every minute we spend with you focused on your problems is another moment of holding you in vibrational alignment with what you don't want, rather than calling you or guiding you toward what you do want.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
But here's the point that you're making, and it's an important point. You are where you are. I am where I am. I feel how I feel. I feel the way I'm feeling right now. So in this moment, where you are and how you feel is in relationship with who you really are. And we said earlier, you couldn't feel terrible if your inner being didn't feel wonderful about this subject. If your inner being didn't know your value and your worthiness, you could never feel defeated, because there wouldn't be that wonderfulness to get sideways of. Does that make sense to you? So we made a strong statement earlier. Some of you heard it and most of you did not. You couldn't feel this bad if your inner being didn't feel this good. Oh, how very nice for you, inner being. Esther said to us more than once, come over here where I am, because the separation between us is too painful. Well, your inner being is not ever going to join you in your lower vibration, but you are where you are. So over time, we've written a lot of books. The Ask and It Is Given book has 22 processes in it, each one of them to help you from wherever you are to move to a better feeling place. And every one of them works. There's not one of you or anybody on the planet who is in any emotional state that is so bad feeling that we couldn't guide them to a little better feeling place with one of those processes. Every single one of them could be moved to another place, but we can't stay with them and guide them to every thought that they're going to think. And so we would say to them almost exactly the same, not almost, exactly the same thing that Jesus said to someone he had just healed: go forth and tell no one. because as soon as you go back into your normal world and start having the conversations that you're accustomed to having, then the gain that you made is lost again, because you'll introduce a resistance right back into your experience and separate yourself from who you really are again. And so this process takes understanding, doesn't it? You have to know that there is another part of you who exists, who is offering a vibration that law of attraction is responding to, or you don't have a guiding light to reach for. And that's what goes wrong with most people. They're trying to please their teacher and their mother and their lover and their friends. They're trying to please all of these inconsistent vibrations around them, where they can't really get a handle on who they really are, where your inner being doesn't wiggle around on your inner being knows who you are. Your inner being is this stable consciousness who is the culmination of all that you have become, and will consistently offer you that signal. So when you hear us describe that and give a name to it and explain to you the way the laws of the universe work, so that you have a footing that is consistent, one thing that we will say about all of you, no matter how long you've been listening to us, how many YouTube clips you've watched, how many books you've read, how many conversations you've listened to, one thing that we know for sure about every single one of you, about every person on the planet, there is not one shred of evidence to the contrary of what we speak. The laws of the universe are so consistent. Another thing that we will say to you is, you have never heard us say one thing ever that contradicts another thing that we've said ever. Because while there is an expansion and an evolution of the process, while your knowledge can get deeper and maybe easier to apply, none of it is ever vibrationally off from any other part of it, which means it's coming from the true heart of that which is source, from the true heart of that which is you. So the sales job that we do all day, every day, is in introducing you to you, in first convincing you that these laws are laws, that they don't wiggle around, they're not arbitrary, and that you are you, and that doesn't wiggle around. That just keeps becoming more and more and more sure and wonderful and knowing. And once you get those two things in place, now you have a reference point. And now, as you pay attention to your own emotions, you can tell whether you're leaning in the direction of who you are or leaning away from it. And sometimes you're leaning so far away from it that the best we can do is stop the bleeding. And you're not going to get that much from us in this conversation, while you will feel a little better. And sometimes we'll have some conversations like we've had here today, where you have gone with us into a place where consciousness has never been before, and you have felt the exhilaration that your inner being felt as we moved into a place that has never been before unto all of the universe. And in your complete alignment, you felt that thrill, you felt that harmony, you felt that evidence of motion forward, you see. And so then we just say more words. Maybe it just sounds like words to you, and maybe you feel it, but this is how you are meant to always feel. You are meant to know your value, and to play with the others of the world, and to realize that the rascals who bother you the most are the ones that help you put the most in your vibrational reality, and that it's all about you focusing and finding and focusing and finding and reveling, until some days you'll just be sitting in some place feeling the absolute perfection of your beingness, and you'll be reveling with your inner being who's doing exactly that with you. And sometimes life feels like it sucks, but it's all your choice. If you're in a really sucky place, take a nap. Do anything to break that momentum.
So you've said before in a different audio that I was listening to that you had a therapist friend who used your scripting process to write out a story about her son's business, and when she made herself believe that for a week, you said?
It was easy for her to believe it because, first of all, she believes us, and she understands the law of attraction, and she had already was good at visualizing. So when she turned her attention toward a daydream of success for her son, she influenced him. We appreciate you bringing this conversation back to us in this format, because the leverage of unresisted thought the power of it is almost unspeakable. If you want to influence someone to their own well-being, then get into that place and imagine them thriving. And they might not be ready for it, but you are.
Because I heard it, like when I heard it, I was like, wait, there's no assertion though. And does that mean that because their vortexes align, or is that how she could, or he's in her vortex?
So step back just a little bit from your question, because you're balled up in it and we can see why. But instead, step into a clear place. So envision your inner being who's aware of everything that you are about and loving you anyway, who knows your potential and never sees any struggle, who only sees the positive aspects of your experience. So imagine your inner being, and imagine your inner being who has complete access to everything you've wished for, focusing only upon what you've wished for, not focusing on anything that you feel you have failed at. And now feel the power of your inner being, all hooked up with what you want to call source, calling you to that. Well, that's all this mother did for her son. She just focused in with the power that creates worlds and got that calling going. He had the option to come or not come, but her influence was mighty because she was hooked into her inner being and his inner being and all the goodness of all that is. That's some powerful positive expectation. Hardly anybody lets themselves go there. Most mothers are wanting well-being for the son and wishing that he'd work harder, or wanting well-being and wishing he would get up earlier, or wishing that he'd chosen another vocation. In other words, most people never find their power because they split their own energy. That's what we meant earlier when we said, until you for a minute find your power, you don't know what it is. Until you find your alignment with source, you don't know what power of influence you have. You could be meeting someone that you meet on a pretty regular basis and have not been with them for a while, so that the things that annoy you about them is not very active within you, and you could have this really general daydream of how much fun you're going to have, and you would have so much fun with that person as soon as today because of your power of non-resisted thought. Or you could dread being with them and remember what it was last time and try to stay off this topic and that topic for fear that it'll go south like it did last time, and then it will. You cannot create in anyone else's reality, but you can create with your inner being, in which case you have the power to influence them positively, or you can create without your inner being, in which case you have hardly any power at all, and you can just muck around in the trenches with all of the other physical humans who are standing and pointing blame at each other all day, every day.
It's really good.
Yeah, really good question. That was good. That was really good. Right here. Are you feeling more of your power? Are you feeling more inclined to be nicer to you? Are you wanting to daydream a little bit? Are you wanting to find your true power? Do you recognize that you've been finding it from here and there? In other words, is a lot of this resonating with what you already know to be? Where'd you come from? You found a different path of least resistance, didn't you?
You bet.